Morning, Graham Vincent, violin maker, musician. Slightly chilly end of April here in the UK. It's apparently the jet stream, which is the airflow across the Atlantic, has got a massive kink in it, and so we're getting all this air from the Arctic, and it really does feel like it. So it's still jumpers and heating kind of weather here, believe it or not. But anyway, it's also been overcast and dull. It's the dullest April on record, apparently, in terms of sunshine and so on. Anyway, that's fine by me because I'm tucked away in the workshop. What have I got on the bench at the moment? I've got the 15-inch viola that I'm making is coming on really nicely. I should have the body closed up and probably the neck onto it and be on the home straight, I should think, after the weekend, which is really good. Apart from that, the Czech kind of violin that I'm restoring for myself has kind of sat there static with nothing happening to it because I'm concentrating on the viola. Same story for the guitar-shaped violin that I'm making as well. That's kind of sat there because all my efforts have been on the viola. So, question and answer time. I printed off some of the comments and so on from last week. So we'll just rattle through those, and I'll do my best to answer some of them. So, user DO5HD7ZB4X, a natty little title there. I have a full-size violin which I first believed to be ash, but was later told was maple. How can I be sure it is maple or ash? Right, I'm going to do a little bit of after the event editing and put in a couple of pictures as we go. They are both good quality hardwoods and, in my humble opinion, perform pretty much as well as each other in terms of musical instrument making. However, obviously tradition dictates that maple is generally used for violin making. And the difference is, the things that make it easy to identify the two are as follows. Should we start with ash? Ash has often got quite a difference in colour between the early growth and the late growth. So you get a fairly pronounced sort of annual ring that's visible to the eye. Not only is it different in colour, but there's a great difference in size of the actual vessels within the wood between the early and late growth. So you get this difference in colour, and also you get this bands of open grain. And once your eye is tuned into that, and also the sort of slightly different colour, the characteristic colour of ash, then ash becomes really quite easy to spot. Maple, on the other hand, the early and late growth is pretty much exactly the same colour. So to the eye, it's difficult to discern annual rings, or less easy, should I say, to discern annual rings. And also, throughout the growth period, the vessels within the timber are very, very evenly matched in size, and they're all pretty small. So the result is that maple is a very smooth, homogeneous kind of timber. In terms of medullary rays, neither one has a very noticeable medullary ray, except when you get to maple being split, riven, cut, planed, very close to the quarter. That is to say, the quarter being a line directly from the centre of the tree out to the perimeter, so that the medullary rays, which are vessels which run perpendicular to the tree and carry waste materials into the centre of the tree, and they allow migration of materials in and out of the tree, basically. I mean, they're very pronounced on oak, for example. Those medullary rays are a characteristic of oak, but they are less defined in maple. You will see that on generally maple bridges for violins are cut with the medullary rays and the quarter being almost the most important thing in mind. So you see that on those. Those medullary rays, in my experience, are less visible in ash. They are still there, but they're not really something that you consider in ash. So Slightly long-winded answer. I hope that covers it. As I say, I hope by now I've put up a couple of images of both to help with that. Interesting question. But in terms of what it means for the sound of the violin, I wouldn't worry either way. They should, potentially, they can both make really good instruments. Right. It's Very Green 532. Yeah, now this was an ongoing discussion on on our violin making discussion group on Facebook, which if you're into such things, then send along a request to join. I think there's a link below in the comments. And we were discussing sort of different ways of showing the thickness of the front, because I personally don't even have a thickness caliper anymore, and I tend to work by using the Stradivarius thickness marking tool and then planing it down until I'm happy with the feel of it, and I don't measure the thickness of them at all, nor do I shine light through them, which a lot of people do. And that's It's Very Green's comment. What I've found works best for me when thicknessing a plate is a good bright lamp. Once the plate gets down to about 3 mil, you can easily see a warm glow through maple and spruce. You can get a very even graduation and easily see how it's developing and get a good feeling for where to take more material away. I have a proper thickness gauge, but I don't find it very intuitive to use. It's obviously great for spot measurements, but a lamp gives you a very intuitive visual map of the plate. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Because this kind of reminded me, I must do that. I think what I'm going to do with the next plate that I do is not use a lamp at all until it's finished. So it won't affect, hopefully it won't affect my gut feel kind of thicknessing. But then I'll inspect it on the lamp afterwards to get an idea of kind of what I ended up with, really, for future reference. Might be quite interesting, might be quite shocking in how varied it is. But as I've said before, I have a sneaky feeling that an uneven front isn't necessarily a bad thing. So that's quite interesting, yeah. Brennan985, not a question. Okay, sorry, so the first point is not a question. Second one, okay. There was a cornerless violin in the latest T2 auction that just ended, lot 429. It has 2 lovely features, and I wondered, how do you like the sound holes? Definitely not F holes. Have you toyed with making an instrument with completely non-standard sound holes? Yeah, let's do a bit more editing. Boom. These sound holes, which are traditional on things like viola d'amore, go by the rather striking and surprising name of the Flaming Sword of Islam. I'm not making this up, honestly, that's what they're called. And actually, with a viola d'amore, I mean, a lot of people take the d'amore to mean of love, like the viola of love, whereas in fact there's a very powerful argument that it's not. It's a corruption of or des Moors, of the Moors. So the Moors being North Africans from Morocco region, that northwest Africa. So it kind of was always thought of as a sort of Moorish influenced instrument, viola d'amore. And the name of those those holes being the Flaming Sword of Islam kind of ties in with all of that as well. It kind of makes sense at that point. And yeah, I mean, they're traditional. You see them throughout sort of Europe on viola d'amore, and sometimes migrating into other instruments as well. Have I thought of using them? Yes, I have. I have thought of it. I haven't actually done it yet. It's one of those things. I must admit, seeing this picture of this cornerless violin with those F holes was rather nice. So who knows? Who knows? Nothing against it at all. And the the second question, how does one go about making that decorated edge? Is it painted or inlaid? It is not inlaid, so to speak. It's not inlaid in the. I mean, when I use the term inlay, I kind of imagine it means, you know, you cut a hole, a recess within a piece of timber and put something into it, so it's kind of laid in, inlaid. This is put in the same way that edge banding is done on on a guitar. So yes, it's real wood, and it's put into a sort of a rebate, or as the Americans call it, a rabbit running around the edge. So how you make it, well, it's not that complicated on this particular one. I mean, to get that sort of little chevron kind of look, you would start with strips of alternating color, and then you'd cut them across that way to give you strips with this sort of chevron. And then you would very carefully plane sand, scrape one edge, glue it to some normal veneer. And if you look at this instrument, it's got the chevrons on the outside, and then it's got a couple of layers of veneer, I think. I haven't got the benefit of the picture in front of me now, but you probably will have. And then you'd have to be so careful bending it in. You may even have to end up sort of gluing in individual bits of it where it starts to break, because it is going to be very short grained, obviously. So, but yeah, that's a kind of an edging that you see on a lot of 19th century cornerless violins. Yeah, I mean, it's quite an interesting finish, isn't it? It's quite a nice look. DIY dark matter. Okay, so in your kind of hurry to finish your guitar-shaped violin, so you're in a kind of hurry. Yeah, I am. I had grand plans to make it incredibly decorous, but I've kind of ditched those to just do it in a really utilitarian, straightforward way, which was the original plan. That's why I kind of thought, I know, I'll make up a guitar-shaped one because it's simpler. So the sort of I did kind of get a little bit sidetracked into this whole decoration thing, but DIY dark matter suggests, how about starting one that you can work on with no time limit? Yeah, so what he's saying basically is, why not just do one that you're going to do quickly and then do another one? Time and money is one thing. I mean, this is a commercial exercise, and I do need people to buy and pay for the things I make. So yeah, how about starting one where you can work on it with no time limit, just work on it when you get time here and there, and put in all the bells and whistles, so to speak, heavily engrave it and inlay it, mosaic, purfling, maybe some gold or silver leaf or oil painting. What do you think? I think it's a great idea, and it's kind of close to what I'm thinking of doing. As I said last time, I think I'm going to make this one really simple one, and then I hope to find the time to make that one I was talking about with the inlay and so on. And yes, I probably will get carried away, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if it doesn't have some of these. Yeah. Okay, yeah, couple of things. There was a question last week, or sort of someone had read somewhere that shellac colour was produced by cooking. At the time, I didn't really question that, but WM Crash has flagged this up. To whoever said oven cooking shellac does something to colour, I don't think that's correct. Two factors that affect the colour of the shellac you buy is the starting material and chemical treatments that remove the colour. The chemical treatments will also shorten the shelf life of the shellac flakes, which is why blonde flakes will always go bad fastest. The other factor that affects colour is the actual source material. If you look up seedlac or sticklac, which is a source of material that shellac is refined from, which is the source material that shellac is refined from, it comes in varieties: Bizaki, Kuzmi, Siam. They all have different colours. You know what? Now that you've said this, yeah, I've read this before. This all makes great sense, and I think that is absolutely correct. So the assertion that you could cook shellac to produce colour may still be true. Maybe it is something you can do, but it's not true in as much as that is the reason for differences in the shellac that we use. So it might still be interesting to try cooking a bit of shellac, but who knows? So that was quite interesting. And sticulari, that also, I mean, the whole discussion about shellac obviously got something in the back of sticulari's mind. I read an article a couple of days ago. An old 78 can be dissolved in alcohol and being made of shellac can then be painted on as a finish or sealer. That's really quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because you still see, people are reluctant to throw out 78s because it just seems like a waste of something that was so valuable to someone at some time in the past. But having said that, there are often unplayable ones, there are often cracked ones, and you can still pick them up for peanuts. I might have a go at that. I'm not sure what they use for the black colour, or whether that's simply because it's such a big chunk of it that it looks black. I don't know. It'd be quite interesting to see what colour you actually get from this exercise. So yeah, I'm going to give that a go the next time I find an old 78, and I shall be keeping my eyes open. It's a nice question from MJF1036. As I have very little knowledge of violins and the historical makers, will you speak about the colour choices typically used? I see examples in red, brown, black, and even tan. Are there geographical patterns and traditions? Yeah, that's really interesting. And there are some broad kind of fashions and patterns and geographical patterns, but obviously, like all things in life, within those there is variation as well. So the very earliest violins that are still about, the sort of there's some from Brescia, and you tend to see those being really quite dark but with a rich kind of redness to it as well. Then the earliest violins that you see from the sort of Cremona kind of area tend to be much paler, almost like a straw colour. And then it's only a generation or two later, at Stradivarius's time, that you start to see richer kind of colours and some reds, but not the stark bright, not the real harsh reds. I associate those with sort of 19th century French making, because, I mean, how can I put this? Violin, who had the Messiah and refinished the Messiah to an extent because he put a new neck on it, and there's all sorts of questions about the Messiah violin, but there we go. Let's not get into that here and now. But that had quite a strong red colour, and that sort of influenced a lot of violin making in France. The German ones tend to be less red and quite dark brown, or darker brown. But also there's a whole group of cheaper German instruments that are now black, and they weren't black when they were made. They were done using an iron compound in the finish to give a red colour, and that has changed over the years to black. Similarly, a lot of the French ones that were bright red when they were made have actually sort of become quite subdued in colour. Sorry, big long pause, but so there are some general areas that do have colours associated with them. There are time periods that do, but like I say, there's variation within all of that, of course. Personally, I don't like bright red violins so much. I don't like the really orangey ones. I tend to like the sort of medium brown without too much red in it, and I also like the sort of the straw sort of end with almost like a little sort of butterscotch warmth to that colour as well. Does that make sense? Describing colours, not my strong point. I've got a couple more questions. From Digdoon, I've been watching your videos for some time now. I notice you are using lots of non-traditional timbers. Yeah. What wood do you use for your corner blocks on the inside of the violin? Do you stay traditional or just use anything? I hope I haven't offended you. No, not at all. Okay, so that's the first question. And then there's a very interesting question, which we'll cover as well in a minute. How do you, sorry, so yeah. I generally will use the same timber that I'm using to make the front, the back and sides for the corner blocks, if it's a fairly low density hardwood. If it's something a little bit more dense, I will tend to use a softwood for those blocks. Obviously, the blocks at the corners aren't really doing much. They're not under a lot of strain and so on, but the neck joint and the end block both do have to have quite a bit of structural integrity, because clearly the neck joint is pretty important in violin, and also where you've got the end pin being wedged into the block, you don't want anything that's just going to crack along that joint. So yeah, that's kind of that's what I have to say about that. I just basically tend to try and match it to the back and sides or a good quality softwood. How do you judge the angles on the end of the sound posts when cutting them, or do you just cut them flat? No, I do not cut them flat. I actually sort of talked about the soundpost tools that I was using. I think, was it last Q&A? I think it was. But I didn't actually talk about how I judge the angles. And the way I judge the angles, I'll just demonstrate. Imagine this pencil is a soundpost. Okay, so I've used that little tool to sort of gauge the length of it. And then what I do is I will hold the soundpost on the outside of the instrument and actually look at the end of it there and gauge the angle that I need to cut it from there, because because of complementary angles and all the rest of it, that will fit on the inside perfectly if, when rotated through 180 degrees, it fits on the outside. So I tend to get that one cut for this, and then the other end cut for that, and again that will work that way around inside. So that's how I do it. I'm not sure how other people do it. I see some people have like fancy blocks with holes in and with angles on, which they use for trimming the ends. I must admit I don't have one of those. I just use a very sharp tool and a very sharp chisel and take it gently. So that's how I do those. Like with all of these things I say, I'm not pretending for 1 minute that I have all the answers, nor am I pretending for 1 minute that there aren't 100 other ways to do it, and some of them will probably be better than the way I do it. But it's just, I think it's always interesting for everyone to have an armory of different options, and I hope I'm adding to your particular armory and your understanding of how, at least it gives you an idea of one way that does work, so it can be done that way. Question from Mason MP 1889. Hey, I have a question for you. I want to try and make a varnish with a mix of oil and spirits, but I haven't found any information on how to do that. I don't know if I would have to possibly just make an oil varnish and a spirit varnish and mix them together, or just make a spirit varnish and add some oil to it. Also, do you think using solely juniper resin would work, as around here there's lots of juniper trees, so it's very convenient to collect some? I think you are talking about two things that are not going to mix here. So in all honesty, I think you might be, and there's no there's no pun intended about resins and so on. I think you're barking up the wrong tree with this one. I mean, spirit varnishes are great, oil varnishes are great, and I think you just need to choose one or the other and go for it. For example, if you want to use your juniper resin, I mean, I don't know juniper resin, but I would imagine if it's like most tree resins, then you would be able to use it. So you'd go down the traditional route, and all my usual caveats and cautions, etc. apply. And you do this entirely at your own risk. But traditionally, what one does is one heats resin in a pan. Do it outside. It's far too much smoke to do it inside, and it's too dangerous to do inside. Do it at the end of the garden, whatever. So you heat the resin, and there's quite a bit of smoke, and basically you probably end up reducing the volume of it to about a third of what you started. But as it cooks, it gets this lovely rich color, but it's still too brittle to use on its own. When it cools, it'll still, you'll still be able to crush a drop of it between your fingernails, and that's not a strong enough finish for a violin. So you actually heat a little bit of oil and add that very carefully to the mix, blend it in, and then take a bit, let it cool, and you're looking to just add enough oil so that the cooled droplet, when you try and crush it, is too tough to crush. That's what you're trying to do. Too much oil and it becomes rubbery, and that kills sound on a violin. And if you do go down that route, then after it's cooled, you will then thin it down with a bit of natural terps. And also, before you use it, you will want to add a little bit of cicative, which is basically just speeds up the hardening of it. And that way you can make an oil varnish, which should work. Will take a little bit of time to dry and harden. You'll probably need a UV cabinet, or you'll need to leave these things hanging in the sun for a while. But honestly, mixing oil and spirit varnish, I mean, the greater minds than mine may tell me I'm wrong and might tell you how to do it, but that's my take on this one. Yeah, so that's it on the Q&As this time. Hope that was interesting. What else have I been up to? Let me think. Like I say, I'm kind of working on the viola, working on this Czech thing. That's pretty much it, really. Keep in touch. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do. I've got the radio program that I do is coming up next week. I'll put a little link below so you've got that information. What I'm going to do is actually put a link, click on it, and that should add an event to your calendar so that you will in perpetuity be you'll see my radio program when it's coming up. Okay, so anyway, look after yourselves. Cheers, folks. Bye.